Welcome to Therapy, Coaching, and Dreams. My name is Dee Kelly. I'm your co-host here with Jim Shalley.
It is great to be back, Dee.
It is good. It's good to be with you, and so enjoy those who tune in. We hear comments about the ways in which some of the things we talk about result in conversations outside of the podcast, which is wonderful. So I'd love to jump right into a particular topic today, Jim, and that is the issue of people who are going through multi-generational transitions. So I think particularly of a group of individuals who maybe have children who are beginning to individuate, some are going off to college, maybe some are getting married. So there's the transition of that younger age group, but the parents are going through issues during that time of wrestling with it.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe simultaneously, they are dealing with their parents who are maybe needing more care or maybe even supervision.
Yeah, maybe transitioning into some kind of a long-term care facility or a 3-tier system. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So it gives us a chance to maybe talk developmentally about all three of those kind of generations, but focusing in particularly on what sometimes is referred to as those who are sandwiched in the middle. But even for those who are singles, they often have parents and are wrestling with what role they play, how do they structure their life in such a way to mitigate the pressures and difficulties that sometimes are being faced. I've had the privilege, you probably have too at some point in time, but of sitting with adult children who are trying to explain to one of their parents why they need to be in a Alzheimer's unit or a facility. And
Yep.
those are incredibly painful conversations, or can be, not always,
Yep.
but they can be very, very hard. So I think maybe a good place to start is simply to focus in maybe on that middle-aged person who's finding themselves all of a sudden in the midst of all kind of relational things that are taking place while maybe trying to hold down a vocation or trying to make sense of their own journey. I think
I think to tie it into our whole podcast, I think that's why, again, to reiterate how important it is to stay vital and aware and how things affect you so that you can move into these transitions a little bit more effective or more easily. I don't know if it's ever easy, but at least you'll be more cognizant of the possibilities and the ramifications of the transition. So,
yeah, one of the things that one of my daughters often says, and I don't know where she picked it up. It's been around for a while, I think, but is the reminder when you're on an airplane that when the oxygen masks come down, put yours on first before you try and help anyone else with
Right.
theirs.
Yeah.
And that is, I think this is one of those times where that saying is so very helpful that if you're not mindful of your own emotional weight and issues, it's going to be incredibly exhausting because you're not giving out of health, you're giving out
Yep.
of exhaustion. And
Yep.
that first thing then is to take care of yourself.
Yep, and that breeds bitterness, that breeds kind of resentment, having to take care of elderly parents or whatever, or kids that are leaving home. And again, there's lots of different directions we could go with that. I mean, some parents can't wait for their kids to leave. Some parents are devastated when they do leave. A lot of adults don't want to really deal with their parents, but they know they feel obligated to do it. Depends on their relationship they've had with them. I mean, there's so many different aspects of trying to navigate those transitions.
I'm going to ask you a particular question, and please feel free to defer if you'd rather not answer. But one of the tough dynamics, I think, is when dealing with parents who are aging and you have siblings and not all the siblings are involved equally or think differently about how things ought to proceed.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've got 3 brothers. I've got a sister. Both you and I have been through this with parents.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Any thoughts about how those conversations get started or how you navigate those waters?
That's such a great, wonderfully entangled question. 'cause I have processed that with many clients over the years, and, yeah, the fairness issue, one feels entitled because they live close and they do most of the work, so if when they pass away, who gets the house? I mean, there are so many aspects to that. Fortunately, I think for both me and you, at least for speaking for me, my 3 brothers, we worked pretty well together. We were on the same page, we didn't have any problems really navigating it. We agreed on the care. We basically agreed on what we would do, what our limits were, and we stuck to those. But you're right, with some siblings, somebody will pop in, they'll come in once every few months, and then they'll demand to be heard and have a lot of input, while another sibling could be living right there and doing most of the work. And it's
Yeah.
challenging.
And I guess it makes perfect sense that this is true as much as you wish it weren't true, that when there's an estate involved, when there's money involved, that really adds to the difficulty of some of those conversations.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Uh,
And if you don't have pretty healthy people, those conversations can go off the proverbial rails quite easily.
yeah. Also, it seems to me one of the things that's really important is to acknowledge that siblings have different family of origin stories.
Mhm.
And so one may have all kinds of problems with the mom. The other one could have all kinds of problems with the dad. Another sibling may have no problems and doesn't understand why the others have problems. Those kinds of pieces also contribute to the mix of who communicates with mom and
Mm,
dad, who steps in and does the interactions with the physicians.
mm,
I felt very fortunate in that my sister and I have, I don't necessarily want to say different skill sets, but we felt comfortable handling different parts. And so all of the medical stuff she's great at because that's her field of study. And I handled a lot of the paperwork and ensuring that all the powers of attorney things were taken care of and interacting with my parents in regard to that. And then we touch base regularly to make sure that things
but
were
again,
covered.
you were cooperative,
Right, right.
and that's why it's and I'm not sure if there's a clear answer to
I
this.
agree completely.
Yeah. Mm,
Absolutely.
mm.
So because there's not a clear answer, what's the process?
Oh, man, the process is to try to keep yourself as healthy as you can emotionally. And does that mean speaking up? That means knowing the limits to what somebody else will hear from you, uh, set boundaries that you are comfortable with, even though you might feel guilty about them. To simply say, I can't visit dad as much as you can. Or even to be as honest to say, I had a difficult relationship with him. I don't need to see dad, but I'll go see him when I mean, that's why. And then other siblings that are a different place, they might get upset by that. I can't believe you're not visiting. They're upset by you're not coming. I mean, yeah, there's so many factors to that.
Yeah,
The main thing is if someone's coming in to talk about that part of it, then it's really trying to encourage them to be as healthy as they can be with their relationship that they have with their elderly parents. And it's same thing almost with kids leaving home or getting married or whatever. All that depends on how close you were to the kids, and that transition can be equally as emotional in some ways.
absolutely. And if you're married, you it's like grief. You grieve in different ways on a different
Abso
timetable.
Absolutely true. Yep.
Yeah.
I think one of the most untalked about, is that a word? Yeah, it is now. The things we don't talk about is how much grief there is in the living process.
That's a great point.
Series of losses that they're normal life transitions, but they're also really a grief experience that we, I think, minimize sometimes.
And I also think that we do the same thing with grief that sometimes we do with a cold that's coming on when we've got deadlines. Somehow we can tell the body, I don't have time for it just yet, and it's coming. But
That's
then all of a
true.
sudden it just kind of crashes. And I think we hold off on grief sometimes because we don't think we have either the capacity or the time.
Or we don't
Because
think it's impacted us that much.
Mhm, yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes uh, in the case of a death of a loved one, you're so busy taking care of details that while others are grieving, you're trying to arrange, take care of whatever paperwork has to be done, get everything together for a memorial if you're doing that. And your grief then
De
comes
del
after.
Basically delayed, yes, delayed
Yeah,
grief, and like a
yeah,
year later, you might find yourself really like, What's going on here?"
yeah.
And you go back and trace it, and it's usually because that you've delayed it.
I become far more familiar and grateful that I've had the privilege of doing so with a certain segment of the adoptee population,
Mhm.
those who are adopted and come to a point in time where they are experiencing a great deal of grief over being adopted, but it typically gets postponed because there is so much guilt surrounding making, well, culture says you ought to be thrilled that somebody adopted you. Like this was the answer to your issues. And so there's not much of a support system by those parents who adopted as well as the culture. And so there is often a delayed grief to that trauma
Yep.
of being adopted. And I think it's so important to validate yourself and say, I'm not choosing to grieve. It is, it just is coming over me. That's the feeling.
Yep. Mhm.
I go back to what you have often said. It's not good or bad, right or wrong. It just is. And when
Mhm.
it comes on you, taking care of your own health, and I know we kind of slipped into the passing of somebody, but grieving the loss of a child in the home who's gone
Oh,
off
yeah.
to,
Mhm.
who's
Or are
getting
you
married.
even grieving parents that are no longer, as viable or vital as they used to be. There's all kinds of ways that life changes that we kinda minimize and act like, "Oh, that's just part of life." And we lose the sacredness on some level of what that means about the whole process of living and how we take for granted every day. Uh, as you know, both me and you, as we age, we look back and think, "Man, where did the time go?" And it's like that's often reported that 2 or 3 generations after kind of an average person is gone, they're forgotten.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that's why so many people strive for some kind of legacy as though they want to continue on. But the majority of us, I think we just 2 or 3 generations, it's like, "Oh, yeah, wasn't Jim around at some point?" "Nope, don't think he was."
Jim, I promise I'll keep talking about you as long as I can.
Oh, no, I wasn't referring to this Jim, I'm sorry. I was referring to somebody else.
I Another grief that comes to mind is the first time a parent forgets your name or forgets your child's name, and
Mm,
you go, "Oh, we have hit a new point here."
yeah,
And then you think of all the conversations you haven't had, and is it too late to have some of those
yeah,
conversations? And there's
sure.
grief over that. What didn't I say that I should have said? So very difficult. So, one of the things, and I'd love for you to react to this, agree or disagree, but one of the things that I think is such a wonderful benefit of, it could be a therapist, could be a coach, could be a spiritual guide, could be just a close friend, but is a place where you can tell the story of your grief multiple times. Like you tell it often to a friend and you know they don't want to hear it again. And so you you hold it inside, but the grief hasn't gone away yet. I mean, that's often the story of trauma. Trauma needs to be told numerous times to
Right.
process the emotional weight that goes with it. Grief isn't much different,
Mhm.
but who am I going to tell how sad I am or how empty I feel if I've already told most of my friends and a couple of them twice, and okay, I can't do that anymore. Somebody who you can tell need to say this numerous times, and they'll receive it is an incredible gift.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. And I think, uh that's always a challenging thing in the sense that when you have a client who has suffered a loss or trauma, and they have said it many times, they'll come in and say, "You got to be tired. You've got to be tired of hearing this." Well, on some level, it's a transition because they're tired of saying it on some level. And
Yeah.
I say,
Yeah.
"No,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
never." I said, I tell them, I said, it's never the same. Every time you tell, it's different. And then the other part of it is for just personality driven. Do you tell the story to let go of it or to hang on to it?
Great
And
question.
in therapy, a lot of people define themselves by the trauma or the sadness, and it's tough to really be honest about that. They tell the story to keep the person alive. They tell the story because they don't want to move on. It's a part of who they are, as opposed to someone who's telling a story that you can tell they really are letting go of it. It's very subtle. Yeah.
Yeah. That's powerful. I know I've worked with individuals where that question has come up in regard to their identity. Is this
Mhm.
story part of who you are?
Absolutely.
Does letting go of it feel like you're letting go of something that's a part of you?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or sometimes it is, do you feel like you're letting another person down if you let go of the story?
Yeah,
That's part of
absolutely
your
true.
grief.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like the gifts you give someone whose child died 10 years ago and you still remember the birthday. Those kind of things are very meaningful because most people move on. And
Mhm.
so to acknowledge that it can be very helpful. They're not defining themselves by that, but just that someone remembers their child or whatever. It's so interesting from that
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. Maybe some comments since we've talked about multiple generations here. Senior adults, when they are going through some difficult transitions, helping them
Yeah.
navigate those
Are
waters.
you referring to anybody in particular or
Well, I'm just wondering if you have any insight for whatever reason, Jim.
It is so interesting. I have several clients that are close in age with me, and those are regular conversations about what does aging look like.
Yeah.
They ask me questions, when are you gonna retire? And it's just fascinating to process. The aging and running out of time and how do you wanna spend the latter years of your life? Yeah, all that is really, really interesting.
Yeah. I would say one of
I
the
know you're
big
not aging, so that's the cool part.
Thanks, Jim. Here's what I think is a very there are numerous like markers on this pathway. But one of the markers is to what extent has vocation become your identity?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Because if you're going to retire from a job and that is how you have introduced yourself, identified yourself, that's been your label, and it's no longer there, you're no longer the authority, you're no longer the person who does whatever that task was, then the question that seems far more philosophical than it actually is, but is who am I then?
Mhm.
What is my identity? And I always think that wrestling with that before you make the shift is really important.
Yes, I would agree.
You
It's
do
like
that.
I think we've said it before, the adage that if you're if you're not retiring towards something, but away from something, it's a whole different dynamic. If you're retiring if you just can't wait to retire, but you have no clear idea of what you're retiring, what's gonna happen after that, yeah. Give yourself about 6 months. I worked with a few people that they're surprised, like, "What am I doing?" Well, because they didn't have a clear sense of it.
There are sometimes, however, Jim, that you're not retiring by choice, that you've
Yes, that's
aged out or forced
yeah,
out, and or an illness or an injury brings a vocation to an end. And same kind of thing. Who am I then if I'm not that? And
mhm,
I think that's always a valuable thing to think about in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. Prepare you for that.
absolutely, but if you don't have again, there's a lot of times there's a built-in system. If you have children and grandchildren, you retire towards that. So you go visit them, you hang out with them, you move to that area of the world with them perhaps, because it organizes you. But if you don't have that, it's like, okay, then you have to organize yourself. And I think that's the challenge. It's like, okay, who am I? What do I do if I don't have any of those things? Or if I have them, but I don't want to do that. It's like, again, the transition, speaking of the middle generation where they have kids leaving and parents going into perhaps assisted living. It's like the parents will want you to visit them more than probably you are able to. Your kids won't want you to visit them in some ways, or they might.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be so cynical about that. But that's where it's so how do you navigate all that? Well, developing your own life. What does that look like? You can react to people's worlds, or you can develop your own, let them react to you.
Mhm.
And
Wow,
I
that's
think
a great
that's
distinction.
yeah, that's the middle generation is like, okay, how about we build our lives? And then people can be upset with you. Like if you have grandkids and you don't come to visit. Well, we're traveling, we got a life. Well, you don't even come to visit your parents. Well, because we've figured out our lives. I mean, there needs to be a nice balance of that, obviously. But I think that's where the proactive initiating energy we talk about with the stir example, accessing that, saying, well, what do we want our retirement or our later years to look like when we have kids we have grandkids and we have elderly parents?
Yeah. And tapping into the personality style that is most comfortable or most natural to you with intent. Like if I am a responder, to acknowledge that to myself and say, how would I like to use those
Mhm.
toward the other generations in my life? And do it intentionally,
Yes,
not by default.
right. Not because
Eh,
it's a natural energy for me.
yeah. And not because everybody's expecting it of me,
Yes.
but I am intentionally doing it in this particular way. Same thing would be true for the stabilizer. If I'm very good at organizing, where do I choose to do that in trying to help my parents or working with my siblings? Or what do I want to stay out of with my kids because they're getting to a stage where they need to do this for themselves, so I'll be available, but I'm not going to try and step in. It's a
Mhm.
very conscious way of knowing that this is a strength of mine, but I'm not going to impose it on
Yeah.
people.
Yep, I think that's going back to what we talked about. That's being as healthy as we can be in those
Yeah,
transitions.
yeah,
Using that model to really where do I need to express my energy, and where do I want to do that? Yeah,
yeah.
good.
And I think that when you function in that way, you automatically become more aware of where other people are operating out of their health or their dysfunction, and you are attentive to how it affects you, but you're not sucked into the circle of the dysfunction if you are attentive to it.
Right.
Not judgmental, not angry, but just attentive to yourself makes you more attentive to those who are around you.
Yep.
Yeah. This one is a tough topic. This is not easy.
Yeah. No, it's not. There's so many different directions we could have gone, and maybe we feel a little incomplete in it. But I think, yeah, that's those transitions are really, really important to be as conscious as you can be, and they sneak up on you too. All of a sudden, you get a call from mom that says, "You know what? Dad's not doing well. We need to move him into a facility." Okay, what that's out of the blue. Well,
Yeah.
we wanna live as if we live forever, but things change. But it
And
is really hard back to originally your original point. How do you start those conversations with siblings that may or may not want to entertain those conversations or have their own strong views about it? It brings up sibling rivalry. It brings up unresolved issues between siblings. It can be very contentious. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And as many wonderful stories as we might hear about aging parents who handle their circumstances, very often aging parents are as unprepared as their children are for them to age. And all of a sudden they're in a situation where it requires some involvement. Like
Mhm.
who's going to take care of this moment? And that kind of crisis, everyone responds to it differently. And if you have siblings, if you're alone, that's incredibly hard because it's all in your shoulders. If
Mhm.
you have siblings, it's incredibly hard because you're navigating waters you've never had to as siblings before.
Yep.
And so everything changes. And I think back to where we were 30 minutes ago, attentive to yourself and trying to be healthy and trusting that it's going to work if you are attentive to your own health and will
Mhm.
step into it out of that place instead of out of panic.
Yeah, and trying to work through it to the point where if you set a boundary and you feel guilty, to stay steady because you
Yeah.
know it's the healthiest, and that's addressing another issue where you do things out of obligation that you don't really wanna do. It's addressing a lot of deeper issues for people when
Yeah.
they're thoughtful about it, so
I also think it's incredibly valuable to use some of the principles we've talked about over and over again. And that is if, for example, you have a sibling who is incredibly irritating to you, what is that talking about that's inside of you that could be just your projection? The they is in me somewhere. Also, we talked about often the family of origin issues. When parents are in need, it almost always triggers family of origin stuff where you feel like you're back in the house again as a teenager.
yep.
And to pay attention to how you feel about those family of origin issues and the work that you've done, and to recognize that it's triggering. So, what does that trigger
Yeah,
mean?
and it could feel like sometimes you haven't done any work.
That's right. Have I made no progress?
Yeah, that's well said, that's great. Yep.
Yeah. As always, great to be with you, Jim.
Great to
We'll
be with
come
you,
back,
D.
dig a little bit more into this as time passes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. That's it for this episode of Therapy, Coaching, and Dreams. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to follow, rate, or share it with someone who might appreciate it as well. Thanks for being here, and until next time, keep growing, stay curious, and take good care of yourself.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff.